What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. This video is going to be part 2 of my big analysis video of the Autumn Nations Cup final between England and France. If you didn't see the first episode of this 2-part series, I definitely recommend going back and watching that video first. It basically lays out my intentions with reviewing the game, my stakes in it, my general views, the game plans for each team, the coaching staff, and the first half of the game. It really sets up a basis for the video, and I will no doubt make references to things in the first video which I broke down much more in-depthly and probably won't repeat it all in this video. If you want to go back and check out that video, I'll drop it down in the description, or you can check out the channel along with some of the other rugby content we've got on the channel. And if you also enjoy my style of commentary, and feel free to subscribe to the channel just to keep up to date with all of the latest videos that I do when they come out. With that out of the way, we can begin part 2 of this series. I'm sorry this has taken so long to get this out. The source I had for reviewing the game and being able to add clips into the video got taken down, so I had to find another way to get the video, plus I had other videos I was filming and a backlog of editing, and then to top it all off, the Christmas break, of course, kicked in. All of that has delayed this video, so I hope everyone had a good Christmas, had a good New Year by the time I probably managed to get this out, and any other events that may have happened along the way. Happy birthday if you've had one, or congratulations on your first child, because this video is taking a long time to get made. For those interested, I've also done the channel's first ever proper podcast along with some friends. We're going to be taking a look back at the Autumn Nations Cup as a whole, and we're going to be checking out some of the teams and players that stood out for us along the way. I'm currently working on that and editing up a little bit, so stay tuned for that being released in the future on the channel. So in part 1, we did a sort of podcast style video breaking down the Autumn Nations Cup final and covered some of the big issues that not just in this game but world rugby has in general, along with looking at some of the brilliant work of individuals in this game, and finally the key running theme of this game, the sheer appalling quality of the officiating in this game from Andrew Brace and the rest of the officials team. After finishing that video and watching it back though, I was astonished at just how many negative points I had to bring up. I thought there would be some points here and there, and there'd be some things to look at what went wrong in the game, but it ended up actually feeling like nearly 70% was negatively looking at the rules and the reffing and some of the player performances, which is crazy because in many ways the first half was actually the best half of actual rugby played in this game. So if you care to join me, we have hit the top of the incline on the roller coaster that is this game. And although there are some ups along the way, it's mainly all downhill from here. So sit back with a beer in hand and let's take a look at the rest of this game, starting with the second half. So at the end of the first half, England had just had the best attack of the game for them, and France were able to perform the best defensive set, for me, of 2020. There are a couple of times where France had the opportunity to kick for corner and attempt to get a try, in my opinion, but instead chose to go for the post and keep adding to the scoreboard. Along with Farrell missing kicks, France find themselves defying the odds and are in the lead at the end of the first half. Now, knowing Eddie Jones, he will have gone in at the halftime break and had some serious words with the players. They have obviously been caught off guard by the performance of this youth France team, and their plan A has completely backfired due to the superb competence of this French team. We all knew England would look to come out in this second half and bring some attacking rugby and attempt to get an early try and put the pressure back on France. France expecting this set out their team all over the half, ready to receive the ball, and Ford kicks the ball deep to Wokey. France managed a clean exit and the second half is underway. Now, for those of you who thought Andrew Brace had a poor first half in the last episode, wait till we get into this video. So after 50 seconds of the first half, we have our first missed penalty by Andrew Brace. A pressured up and under kick is made by Dulan, which isn't collected very well by Vunipola, and Sinclair has to recover, doing well, sliding across the ground and being able to pop the ball back up. France apply good pressure and get a tackle on Ford. Billy Vunipola, obviously not happy with dropping the ball, tries to make up in the preceding ruck. Except what we can see is Vunipola entering the ruck literally from the wrong side and then proceeds to lie completely horizontally over the tackled player, sealing off the ball from the French and stopping them being able to actually take the ball themselves. A textbook penalty, and one Andrew Brace has already given multiple times in this game already, but apparently this one doesn't count. Oh dear, Mr. Brace, how far you still have to fall. Now, when I did watch back my last video, I did feel there were an awful lot of negative things directed towards the England team, and this wasn't intentional at all, but it does reinforce the narrative that I thought going into the game, that England have been promoted to a similar stature as New Zealand in terms of referees not finding penalties against England because they are the better team on paper. And in the first half, I did find that Andrew Brace missed so many penalties against England, but was penalising France for the exact same thing. But in the second half, he loses the ability to do even that. Only 10 seconds on from the Vunipola foul, we get to see a clear missed penalty against France. After Jalibert catches the ball, we get to see the French 13 create a perfect block, with two English players running straight into him, stopping the tackle on Jalibert. This is also a penalty, one you think most referees would give, but apparently not. Watson eventually manages to get the tackle on Jalibert, and we see 13 enter at the side of the ruck, going straight off his feet, stopping England getting the ball. This is a clear penalty in Andrew Brace's mind. Except, why, if you give this penalty, is the Vunipola incident not given in as a penalty? And while we're on the subject of penalties, having reviewed this second half now a couple of times, I am astonished to announce that in this whole 80 minutes, I cannot find a single penalty that is flagged by the assistant referees that Andrew Brace missed. That is a shocking statistic for Tier 1 rugby. So England take their penalty and move further down the field. France managed to defend well against a strong England maul, and England go on the offensive, and probably could have scored a try had it not been for a great tackle from Mo Farah. England have clearly had words at halftime and come out with much better aggression. The ball passes wide to a broken French line, and Ford goes for a cheeky cross-field kick. A very well-weighted kick, but Anthony Watson just couldn't collect it. Now, on first look, it's not 100% sure who touched the ball last, so we go to the TMO Ben Whitehouse to find out. What happens next is over 2 minutes of reviewing every angle at various speeds to find an answer. For context, it took me watching live about 30 seconds to have the same decision as Ben Whitehouse eventually comes to. Even Andrew Brace calls the correct answer and gets frustrated when Ben Whitehouse still can't make up his mind.
It's off the white hand there to me, Ben.
Yeah, 2 seconds, we're just having a look at that again, we're going to slow it down.
Look at his face.
Andy Brace wasn't happy with that.
So as much as I complain about how badly Andrew Brace performs in this match, we also have to take a look at the incompetence surrounding him. Neither touch judge offering any opinion, and a TMO who can't make up his mind when he can watch every incident frame by frame. Does that absolve Brace from this game? Not really, but Jesus, do I feel more and more sorry for this man. The more times I watch this game, it must feel like he's trying to build a house of cards and the only help he has is chimpanzees with sledgehammers in their hands. So we have a scrum, and we get to see Eddie Jones playing a tactical game 3 minutes into the second half, and he takes off Underhill and Launchbury for Hill and Earl. Two big scrummagers fresh on the field to apply pressure on the 5 metre line for France. France managed to survive the scrum, and Dante makes a surging run to try and buy France some room. France attempt to clear, but for some reason Presenti decides to run around the back of his scrum half, right in the passing line for the fullback, and Kuyu has to take the ball on himself and gets wrapped up. It's a bit of basics 101 for rugby. Never as a forward should you stand behind the scrum half, stopping a clearing kick. It definitely won't be helping him get into this France starting team. France managed to clear their lines, and we actually have a couple of good minutes of attacking rugby for both teams until an offside penalty is called against Garassi. A correct call. This call actually comes from Ben Whitehouse, not Andrew Brace. But we have to ask the question, why is Garassi offside here and Sinclair not offside in the first half when he stood here? I don't have an answer for this, but the fact remains the inconsistency in this game is truly painful. England managed to get a penalty here, and it's a simple kick for someone of Farrell's quality, and England close the gap to 4 points. France kick off, trying to regain their stride, kicking the ball to Curry, as they do in every kickoff. England clear well, and we have a couple of minutes of kicking tennis, waiting for some space to open up until eventually Jalibert takes it on himself to attempt to run. And to be honest, I think this is a correct call. With Raka on his outside, we can see no one is guarding this near wing for England. Jalibert takes a good line, drawing Curry and Johnny May, leaving Raka with miles of open space to run, but a poor pass lets them down and Raka can't collect it. I reckon if this was Ntamack who chose to make this run and gives that pass, I reckon this is a huge counter-attacking opportunity, but sadly for France, Jalibert cannot pull off that truly spectacular thing we see in Ntamack. England have a scrum, and of course, as happens throughout the game, England win a penalty at the scrum. A note I did make here was so far in this 50 minutes, every single scrum where England put the ball in, England come away with winning a penalty or a free kick. But on every input by France in the scrum stays very, very strong. And I cannot make up my mind whether France can't cope with an England scrum, or whether referees should actually be looking at whether England are causing their own scrum to collapse, as referees tend to find in favour of a penalty for the team putting the ball in at the scrum. But I digress. So England begin a huge attack, and it is only stopped by the sheer speed of this French defence. But here lies the next talking point, and this isn't to do with England specifically, but I really think World Rugby needs to come up with a rule about what advantage means in rugby. Referees seem to make up the length of time advantage lasts for almost on the fly, and this scrum is a great example to look at. Just look at where this scrum starts, about 5 metres from the touchline, and they are 25 to 30 metres away from the try line. Advantage is called for hinging at the scrum. Is it dangerous? No. Is it a try-stopping penalty? Not really. It is simply a penalty at a scrum. England then take this ball and spread it all the way to the other side of the pitch, making it 5 metres from the try line, making 5 passes along the way. And this could have easily been a try had Daly held his man and passed the ball a little later, and all of this isn't considered an advantage by Andrew Brace. I feel World Rugby needs to introduce some sort of rule about how long advantage lasts for. Maybe it should be 10 seconds maximum, or maybe a maximum number of passes made, or a maximum number of phases, or a maximum number of metres made before the advantage is over. I don't know how you can make up nearly a quarter of the pitch, spreading it 50 metres from one side to the other, nearly score a try, and a referee still not believe your team has had an advantage, and not just use the most of the opportunity. And with then being no bar set for referees, advantages can become outrageous, as you will get to see later on in this game, believe me. England decide to take the points from this penalty, and to the shock of everyone watching, Farrell misses yet another kick. I am surprised at this point kicking duties aren't given to Ford, as Farrell has obviously been shaken a little bit. We can see how shaken England have become a little later in the game, when a huge clearing kick is made and caught by Watson. Now, Watson is an incredibly quick player and a great counter-attack runner, but just watch this. We see him catch the ball here, and he moves the ball along the backs to Daly and then on to Johnny May. And it actually takes a full 5 seconds for this ball to get back to where it even started, just closer to midfield. And it's things like this that I feel let England down in this game, giving France the opportunity to reset their line and push forward, when England are normally so relentless in attack and try to break down a team. And it's a testament to the French endurance in being able to make up this 50 metres back in that amount of time. We also get to see some brilliant individual play from French players in this game. Dulin makes a great catch under pressure from 3 England players, beating Watson in the air, who has a bad game in the air overall really, and proceeds to make up a good 5 extra metres and create some time for France, followed immediately by a ridiculously good kick from Jalibert, kicking low and getting the bounce over the normally so brilliant Elliot Daly in the backfield. And finally, the pressure applied from the chase of Raka sees Daly kick the ball dead. For an inexperienced team, there are a number of players putting their hands up for France, showing they belong there. The subsequent line-out isn't straight, and as such, England win a scrum. Now this for me is where France make their first big mistake. Before this scrum, Woki is subbed off for Makalu, both of whom have impressed me immensely in this Autumn Nations Cup, and I think would fit very well in the normal France team. But Woki so far is having a brilliant game. He is an absolute nuisance for the English line-out. He's winning turnovers, he's dominating rucks, and they sub him off for literally the identically skilled Makalu. Now, I can see the French mindset here. They replace a player with an identical player, they lose nothing. But that isn't a positive, as you also gain nothing. So far, I don't think I've even mentioned Tolofua at 8 for France, because he hasn't stood out for me. And to me, the correct call here is to take Tolofua off, move Jalonche to 8, Makalou to come in at 7. These players have already played in these positions against Italy, so they know how to do it. Plus, that way you would get both Woki and Makalou at the same time to just destroy areas of the game for England. But that was an opportunity I feel Galtier did miss, in my opinion. So England have a scrum, and what do you know? Another free kick for England comes from that scrum. Surprise! And England begin the assault until the 57th minute, where we get to see one of the most lenient high tackle penalties ever. Ben Earl is tackled around the legs, and as he begins to fall, a second tackler makes contact with the head. Now let's pause the game and have a look at this high tackle. By the time the second tackler comes in, Ben Earl already has one knee on the ground and is basically at waist height of the tackler. Is it technically high? Yes. Does he make contact with the head? Yeah, you have to agree with that too. But I reckon if you look at every tackle in a game of rugby, you find this 20 times in a game of rugby. Even the commentary team disagree and think it's a very soft penalty.
Well, that's what it's a very difficult one, isn't it? Because Ben Earls is about 3 foot from... He's already going down in the tackle. There's a mitigating circumstance there, surely. I don't know what else that big fella could do.
But England won't complain, but Brace has now set a precedent for what this counts as a high tackle. So we should see penalties given for any contact to the head from now on, shouldn't we? Whether or not they're waist height or anything else. Farrell steps up and, shock horror, misses the penalty again. At nearly 60 minutes in, Farrell has only scored 2 out of 5 kicks. This is a terrible performance from him, and yet we still don't see Ford take over for some reason. I'm not sure why at this point you still feel so confident in Farrell. I don't know whether there's an arrogance thing that he refused to alleviate himself from the kicking duties, but I truly think at some point Ford needs to step up there and say, I'll take it from here. You've obviously taken a knock, taken an injury. You've not got your head set on kicking for posts. I'll take it from here. France drop the ball out and England proceed to pin France back. And on the 60-minute marker, we get to see what is a crucial turning point in this game for me. The injury to Jalibert. A sloppy catch is recovered by Jalibert when a tackle comes in from Elliot Daly from behind. A swinging arm over the shoulder of Jalibert, catching him on the chin and shaking his head back. A clear high tackle, and you could argue looking at a yellow under review, as they are both standing up. It is direct contact to the head with force, but that's not for me to call. And that's what Andrew Brace exactly felt himself. It wasn't for him to call. There was no penalty awarded. How is the high tackle on Ben Earl given and this one not on Jalibert? Jalibert crumbles to the ground after this contact, and England do really well to ruck over, and Itoje does brilliantly to disrupt the ball. In this counter-ruck, Jalibert gets stamped on by a couple of players, and I'm not sure if it's the raking on the leg or the hit to the chin that actually means he has to come off, but surely it's something the TMO will check. Nah, it's fine. We don't need to review anything, do we, Mr. Ben Whitehouse? So Jalibert comes off for an unknown reason, and thanks to there being no TMO to find out a reason, it will remain that way. We see Carbonell come on, who doesn't have a terrible game, but his first touch of kicking the ball dead leaves much to be desired. France lose a vital player in the final quarter, and it certainly shows. We get to see how valuable Jalibert was in defence as well, only 5 minutes later when Villiers is forced to make a clearing kick because he has filled in Jalibert's missing position. Obviously not a comfortable backfield player, he misses the fact that on the near side you have 5 French players and 2 English defenders. Potential for a great counter run. Villiers kicks straight into the hands of Daly, who makes one of the best positional kicks of the year, making nearly 50 metres and squeezing the ball into the France 5-metre line. France are under huge pressure and can barely get out of their half, let alone make an attack. England make some more tactical subs expecting a big drive, but France play a crazy line-out throw over the line-out and it actually comes off for them. And what would this episode be without another Andrew Brace smackdown? France take the ball forward from the line-out and the French player is tackled in the head by both Itoje and Ben Earl, with Andrew Brace looking directly at the tackle. Now, for the cynics who say, Mad Dragon, you're just looking for issues now, to those I say no. It is about consistency. If Andrew Brace feels that this tackle on Ben Earl is a high tackle, then you have to be consistent and say that this is also a high tackle. Andrew Brace is now just awarding penalties against one team and not the other. And this is where it devolves into people claiming referees are biased. There is something seriously wrong in World Rugby where referees don't penalise the better team fairly against the expected weaker team, and it ruins games. And this to me is what a TMO should be looking for all day long. I'm not sure what raffle Ben Whitehouse won to be the TMO for this match, but boy is he not cut out for it. He misses so many clear penalties in this game and barely helps Andrew Brace with anything. I am Welsh and I truly believe Nigel Owens is/was the best international rugby referee, but my God is Ben Whitehouse not on his level by any means. More work needs to be done by the TMO to find things the referee has missed and not just sit there and wait for a referee to ask, did I miss something? Which just seems like a ridiculous question a referee is never going to want to ask at Tier 1 rugby. But France live on in this game through the work of brilliant individuals, Woki having a brilliant game, Dulan hasn't stopped running, Jalibert with a brilliant kicking game, and in the 66th minute you get to see a sight you do not often see, a scrum half winning a turnover at the breakdown. Kuyu by no means has an outstanding game and there are an awful lot of things he has to work on, but look at the passion on his face as he wins this turnover. It is a wonderful thing to see from a rugby enthusiast point of view. People playing with heart and passion and not just playing mechanical point-scoring rugby. It is also mirrored a few minutes later by Villiers when he manages to win a brilliant turnover himself, resisting a counter-ruck from Joe Marler and Maro Itoje. Two huge players. France are throwing everything at this game. Something else that astonishes me here is what can be heard between the players and the ref in the background. It's quite hard to hear, but try and listen out for what Andrew Brace says.
Speak to me about that again and I'll pull you off the field, okay?
I don't know who on the England team the referee's actually talking to here, but Brace's words are, "Don't speak to me like that again or I'll put you off the field." Which means something very strong was said to or about the ref, something worthy of being put off the field. But my question is, if something that bad was said, why is the player not sent off from the field? This isn't football, but already Andrew Brace has players shouting at him all game and are now saying comments to him worthy of being removed from the field. So why doesn't he actually do it? And for anyone thinking that the ref just doesn't want to ruin a final with giving a red card out, it really shouldn't matter. You can't speak to the ref like that. For context, this was Wayne Barnes in the Premiership final.
This isn't how you behave as a captain, okay? Please keep your comments to yourself.
After a terrible scrum, Barnes awards a penalty on the mark of half-time that no one was expecting to happen. The players retreat and a comment is made by Dylan Hartley in the background. And because of this, Barnes awards a red card.
More dramatic finish to a half than this.
He leaves the field.
And in this instance, the captain is sent off in a final. No one should be above the rules in how you talk to a referee, and I have great respect for Wayne Barnes in making this decision, even if there will be a backlash for him from the players and fans. Whereas Andrew Brace just keeps giving them warnings, and it just comes across as appearing weak to these sorts of players. These players will take full advantage if you don't stand up and completely keep control of a game. So France have a penalty, and I disagree with their decision here. They have only been in the England half a couple of times this second half. England are on the back foot and have given away 2 penalties in 2 minutes for the same offence. And the referee has given a warning to a player about comments being made. Macalau is dominating lineouts. France are winning every maul. France have all the momentum. To me, this is where you have to kick for corner and attempt the try. Death or glory. If England concede a penalty again, there could be a yellow or a penalty try. If you score a try and a conversion, you go 11 points up, meaning England have 10 minutes to score 2 tries or 4 penalties. You completely seal off this game. England are already 2 penalties down from winning, so it's most likely they'll already be trying to score tries. Scoring a penalty only puts you 7 points ahead, so it doesn't make a difference in try-scoring circles, but France opt for the posts. Carbonell does get the conversion and France go 7 ahead with 10 minutes left. We are into the final 10 minutes, guys, so who's ready for a rant? England go on the offensive in the 71st minute when an advantage is awarded for Prezanti not rolling away in the tackle. Can I just point out how pathetic I feel this penalty is? Prezanti goes down with the tackle and Itoje lays on top of him, pinning him in the tackle. Very clever from such a class player as Itoje. The referee tells the pinned man to move, not caring that Itoje isn't even counter-rucking. He's just laying on top of him. Prezanti is given a total of 1.5 seconds to move when he is kicking and actually attempting to do so, and the referee awards an advantage. To me, this is such a ridiculous penalty, and I can see many referees pointing out Itoje is clearly pinning him in, but what happens next, I hope, changes how advantage is used in rugby forever. The advantage from this penalty lasts for 58 seconds. Let's repeat that, 58 seconds. Nearly a full minute. That is 1.25% of the entire game. Is this one advantage? In this advantage, England start out about 25 to 30 metres out, and in this passage of play, they make 14 passes, play 6 phases, complete 6 full rucks, have 2 line breaks, play from the right-hand side of the field, all the way to the left, all the way to the right, back to the middle, and then go back to the right. Nearly get a try if it wasn't for a great tackle from Villiers in defence, and at the end of all of that, Andrew Brace calls them back saying, no advantage. How on God's green earth can you have all of that happen in a game of rugby and a referee not believe England have gained an advantage and award them a penalty? I am genuinely dumbfounded. Even the commentary team mention how long this advantage actually went on for.
It was a heck of an advantage, wasn't it, from Andy Brace?
How can this be allowed in Tier 1 rugby? All of that because a player wouldn't get out of the way in 1.5 seconds is astonishing. World Rugby needs to fix this. Advantage has become, let's see if a team can score a try, and if not, they can have 3 points. Whereas advantage should be, you have the opportunity for 3, do you want to take it or attempt to play on, losing the chance for 3 if you make good enough ground under advantage? Ironically, in the middle of this absurd advantage, the officials team completely miss an actual penalty, Will Stewart getting tackled high twice by Andrew Brace's standards, and no new advantage or penalty is given right in front of the post for England. This is just terrible refereeing across the board. Farrell, of course, manages to get this kick because this one's actually directly in front of the posts. And France go full-on offensive. Macalau with a brilliant jump, managing to steal the ball back from a lifted Itoje on the restart, which is no easy feat. France go off full-on attack and win themselves a penalty inside the England 22. And again, France go for the posts. And again, I have to disagree here. England already need 2 penalties in 5 minutes to win, which is not an easy task to do. So England have to already be thinking they need a try and can't bank on getting penalties. If you score a penalty, England can still stop you from winning by scoring the same try as they would do had you not gone for the penalty towards the posts. You have 5 minutes on the board. You can kick this so easily to 5 metres and the driving maul option is there. If you score a try here, you win the game. England won't score 2 tries in 5 minutes. The English defence has been poor, actually, all game, and holes have opened up everywhere. McAloo is winning every line out, but France go for the 3. Carbonell does get it, but how costly will that decision be with 4 minutes remaining, 7 points in it? 4 minutes left of this first half, and if you're an England fan, this is going to be where you want to look away before the cringe starts to come in, because I'm sure you're aware what is coming up, but it is much worse than you actually think. So let's take a swig of beer and let's dive into this. This is going to be a referee onslaught. So England kick off, kicking deep, obviously trying to pin France back in their 22. I don't know why they didn't kick short here and try and recover the ball, because now they need access to the ball somehow, which means England move into desperation mode for penalties. The best of which comes from Itoje, pretending he's a tree being chopped down for lumber. It is honestly quite sad to see such a class player perform a cheap stunts like this to try and get the referee awards penalty. But England know the referee is on their side, so it's worth a go. I just constantly laugh every time I see this. This is such a ridiculous position for Itoje to find himself in. He looks like one of those waving inflatable arm men falling over. Why does he fall over here? He is a huge man. He never falls over that easy in rugby. To me, the only reason this wasn't a penalty is because Itoje looked at the assistant referee and didn't realise the assistant referees apparently aren't allowed to award penalties in this game. I could legitimately watch this on repeat. I think it is so funny how ridiculous it actually is. France managed to clear their lines and McAloo makes a great follow-up tackle. And now we get to see Will Stewart go straight off his feet in the ruck. Hands about half a metre away from the player, both knees on the ground. Andrew Brace is standing 2 metres away, but this apparently isn't a penalty. You can't give a penalty for going off your feet with 3 minutes left to the end, can you? 20 seconds later, the ball is spilled and Villiers and George Ford race for the ball, Ford just beating him. George Ford starts to climb back to his feet and Villiers tackles him again and rucks over. Oncoming French players knock him off his feet, knees land on the ground and hands go in front of the player. And there's only one clear answer in Andrew Brace's mind. It's a clear penalty for going straight off your feet. Obviously that's a penalty, and it should be a rule you should strictly look at when there's only 3 minutes left in a final of a game. It is ridiculous how close together these two penalties are, and it is the exact same penalty and the referee only penalises one team. I've given up trying to be a little bit critical of it now and find it almost funny how ridiculous this refereeing is, and it perfectly demonstrates just how bad the refereeing is in this game, and it's about to get so much worse. England move up the field and have a successful line out. They are back in full-on attack mode. Players charging forward until the ball comes to Vunipola, who is tackled to ground and knocks the ball on. And very clearly. So clearly, the commentary team pointed out immediately.
And looking, did he knock that on? Don't look to that, no, says the referee.
We all saw it live as it was happening, and yet somehow none of the officiating staff see it. Not one, including Ben Whitehouse watching the same live pictures as we all are. A game-winning decision goes in favour of England, and England press on when Farrell takes the ball into contact and goes to ground and loses it forward. Another knock-on. And not just by a bit, it is a good metre along the ground and it is dragged back in. And still, none of the officiating teams see this. Look at where Andrew Brace is standing when this knock-on happens. He is literally looking at the ball roll forwards. Blow your whistle, Brace. Do your job. Ben Whitehouse, pass on to Andrew Brace that you've seen a knock-on. Do your job. What is happening? And then to make it worse, George Ford comes in at the side of the ruck to clear out. Another penalty. Andrew Brace, standing like a statue, does nothing. Then this loose ball pops out at the side of the ruck. The France team pick it up, as they're allowed to do, and Andrew Brace immediately blows his whistle to penalise the French player without working out how the ball came out to the side of the ruck, while both commentary personnel can be heard agreeing the ball went forwards very clearly.
Has gone forward, definitely.
Why is this not looked at by the TMO? It is shocking that people with no qualifications in rugby, like myself, and even people in the commentary booth, can see a clear knock-on, and yet a TMO cannot see it, along with everyone feeding him images and sitting next to him in the TMO booth and pass on a rule to overrule Andrew Brace. I don't agree with banning referees if they have a bad game. We all have bad days. But to me, Ben Whitehouse, after this game, needs to be stripped of being able to TMO international games. He clearly isn't up to the job and should retrain at club level before his next international game. It did lead to some hilarious comments on Twitter, though, of people saying that Ben Whitehouse has to have obviously gone for a dump or something to have missed those calls. I truly believe if the referee calls this correctly, France win this game. The scrum will take about 30 seconds and France know they can't compete at the scrum, so the ball would go in and out of the scrum at great speed, hold for 20 seconds and kick the ball dead. This is an example of a referee handing a game to a team by being completely biased due to a small series of incidents leading up to this point, being shouted at, questioned and having incompetence surrounding him in an officials team. He is no longer looking for fouls against England, and looking back almost entirely penalises the team in defence at any given point in this game. Is his style of refereeing not fit for Tier 1 rugby? Have the new rules at the breakdown ruined rugby? Are you more likely to win a rugby game now if you just don't have the ball? There are some big questions that realistically need to be asked by people higher up than me in the world of rugby. So England pretty outrageously are given a penalty and they kick deep into the French 22 with a line-out obviously going for a maul. They know a try or a penalty will come as Andrew Brace is now in full favour of them. And of course that's exactly what happens. The maul driving forward and it even goes backwards at one point, but Brace doesn't care anymore. He's either giving a try or nothing. And Cowan-Dickey does well to spin out of the maul and get over for a try. It's actually a very well worked try and England do well. France have been able to win most mauls in this game and this is one of the few where they just couldn't hold up against the English barrage. And Farrell manages to get his fourth kick of the game. England tie it up and we move on to sudden death. And with that, we have ended the second half. What a roller coaster. I did see a couple of articles stating they were outraged by the French players shouting during Farrell's final kick. And whilst a little unsportsmanlike, I almost want to say it's completely justified. In this 80 minutes, I reckon there was somewhere between 10 and 20 penalties that England did not receive against them during this match, and maybe about 5 or 6 for France that they actually didn't receive that they should have. I think the referee was incredibly one-sided, and the fact that France didn't win this game in the 80 minutes, to me, is a travesty in the sport of rugby, especially given that final 5 minutes. They played out of their skin and did everything they could. They made mistakes along the way, absolutely, and I think they should have gone for the corner in the final 10 rather than the post and pinned England back. But I think very few people who can critically break down a game can actually say England played well in this 80 minutes, and overall they really didn't deserve deserve to even get that draw. They committed fouls that were fine 1 minute and then got a penalty if France did them. We had Johnny May diving to get penalties. We had players screaming and commanding the ref, disrespecting the ref with comments that nearly had them sent off, knock-ons not getting picked up, and Itoje childishly falling like a tree to try and get cheap penalties. And yet papers and articles only pick up on the final 10 seconds, where some people shout at a kicker and say it's unsportsmanlike is beyond hypocritical to me. But that 80 minutes is behind us, and we can begin to look at this sudden death final. Go and grab a drink, boys and girls, because I feel this could be a long one. So I think we need to talk about the concept of sudden death in rugby. Of course, it is a very rare event to happen in rugby. Getting a draw after 80 minutes is hard enough, let alone a draw in the final of a tournament. A rarity to the extent that I'm sure there were some people watching this game live who weren't even sure of the rules. What does sudden death mean? How do you win? How long does it last? What happens if no one scores? These are genuine questions I can see an average or below average watcher of rugby having when this became the deciding factor of this game. For those of you still unsure, I'll do a quick breakdown for you. A sudden death occurs when after 80 minutes both teams are level on points, but the game for whatever reason can't end as a draw as they require a winner. This is normally a World Cup final or a club level final or some sort of qualifying match in a tournament where two teams and there can only be one winner can progress onwards in the tournament, such as a World Cup quarter or semi-finals. Sudden death is made up of two 10-minute halves playing on both sides of the pitch, and the first team to score any points is declared the winner. These rules have remained basically unchanged since the conception of rugby. And for me, that is where the issue lies. The idea of sudden death on paper sounds incredibly exciting. Either team can win by scoring a try, or a penalty that crushes your opponents, or a super tactical drop goal. Brilliant rugby, and I'm sure when it was originally created it was just that. But we have to remember that this concept was also created when rugby balls were basically just leather. Kick takers had a 20% kicking ratio. Their kicking tees were just heels stamped into the ground to make a divot for the ball. Most players had day jobs and met up in spare time to play rugby and therefore were less drilled. And there was much more free-flowing rugby, along with that you can stamp and rake players in rucks. High tackles were just real men playing rugby and not a penalty, and I'm sure a punch resulted in some strong words from the referee. Fast forward to 2020, professional rugby athletes now exist. Players earn good money to stay at the top of their game, coaches drill and watch VTs of opponents to find weaknesses, penalties exist in every area of the pitch for a variety of things. Technology has allowed players to become almost superhuman in terms of fitness and endurance. Kicking percentages for every team are now 80% or higher. The balls are made to fly better and straighter. The tees they kick from cradle the ball perfectly. Most teams now also have a percentage kicker and a designated long-range kicker, meaning basically any penalty within about 50 metres of the try line is a potential game-winning opportunity. And with all of that put together, I would bet any amount of money you will never see a team attempt to go for a try in a sudden death game. Sudden death is just convincing the ref you need a penalty and let the kicker do the rest. And to me, it spoils it. A great 80 minutes of rugby ends in a draw. And realistically, a well-drilled team should win a sudden death via a penalty under about 2 minutes or so. It is almost unstoppable for a team to lose if they are prepped for it and also have the kickoff. So there, in a nutshell, is sudden death, in my opinion, in a modern game. And if you didn't know a lot of that before, don't worry, because I'm sure given the age of some of the French players, they have never been a part of a sudden death game in their entire careers and may not even know the rules themselves. So France definitely going into this with a disadvantage. Eddie Jones most certainly probably has a game plan ready for this scenario, but knowing how well drilled his England team are and normally expecting to win in inside the 80 minutes. I doubt this plan has ever really been shared with players, so Eddie Jones now has a few minutes to tell them the plan, and the players of vast experience are able to adapt, and I'm sure they're all fully aware of what a sudden death game involves, whereas Galtier probably had to literally break down the rules for players to understand how it works. How can they win, and what do they do in this new uncharted territory? So something that took me by surprise before this kicks off, I assumed, as I'm sure was the rule for sudden death, the team who kicks off in the first half of sudden death are the team who kicked off at the start of the game normally. So France kicked off the first half, England kicked off the second half, so for sudden death I expected France to be kicking off again, actually giving them an advantage because whoever kicks off in sudden death has a huge advantage for a simple reason that you can kick a team deep from the kickoff. This leads to 3 outcomes. The first option, the receivers have to play out of their own half all the way down to the other end of the pitch and score, which is nearly impossible at Tier 1 rugby. Secondly, hold in their half for 10 minutes without giving possession or a penalty. I believe this is literally impossible to do given the current rules. Or third choice, they have to kick the ball clear, giving you the possession in their half for a drop goal or a penalty scoring opportunity. As I mentioned in part 1, this is without a doubt England's favourite method for kickoffs. But this game was not to follow that rule, and to my surprise, Andrew Brace brings over both captains and flips a coin to decide who's going to kick off. I can't remember this being a rule, and this was reinforced when questioned by the French. Andrew Brace's response to this was that it is a new rule introduced.
Go about their work in not a very exciting fashion.
Now, I've tried to find out where this rule has come from, and if anyone genuinely knows when this rule was implemented, please drop it down in the comments, as it's something I would actually really like to know as well. I spent a good half hour before filming this video looking up the rules around sudden death, and I cannot find anywhere where this new rule came in from. In the 2019 World Cup, it is stated that the team who began the game kicking off begins sudden death by kicking off, which means this rule was introduced this year, but it can't have been introduced for the Six Nations, as sudden death can't really happen in the Six Nations, as it doesn't matter if a team draws. And maybe it was introduced for a Southern Hemisphere tournament that I don't know about, but other than that, it means that this rule was introduced purely for this tournament, which feels like a very strange time for a rule change. And I'm sure for many a rugby fan, especially a French rugby fan, it is believed that this new rule was created after being written on the back of a blank cheque passed to Andrew Brace at the end of the game by Eddie Jones, already signed like some sort of Bond villain. But I would be very doubtful if France won the coin toss, that cheque would have been for nothing. Although seeing as Farrell was the one who got to call it in the air, maybe Eddie Jones slipped him a 2-headed coin while he was at it, we may never know. So Farrell wins the coin toss and obviously says they will kick off, but Andrew Brace does allow the French to pick which side of the pitch they'd rather lose the game on, so there's a nice courtesy of this new rule, as if which side of the pitch makes any difference in sudden death, unless you have a 200-mile-an-hour wind behind you that blows the ball back into the opponent's half, you are still probably going to lose. The coin toss is settled and the players take up their position on the halfway line. All of them. Both teams think that they are kicking off, as no one in the whole French team knows of this new coin toss rule that Andrew Brace has to go on and explain it. Obviously, World Rugby isn't that great at passing on memos of tournament-winning rule changes. Brilliant. France move back to their line and expect the inevitable deep kick. England follow the meta, kicking deep, and France choose to kick the ball away from their try line, but back into England possession. Sudden death lasts for 1 minute and 9 seconds before a penalty is awarded in a kickable and ultimately game-winning position. Let me repeat that. It takes 69 seconds for the better drilled team who had the kickoff to win the game. That is how stupid sudden death is. 80 minutes of hard-fought battling from the underdogs, surviving injuries and defying the odds, taken away in 69 seconds, almost as long as the England advantage that Andrew Brace originally gave them in the second half, and this all because Andrew Brace considered this a penalty, which is 50-50 at best. Jalonch on his feet, attacking the ball for 2 solid seconds, along with Makalau behind him, also over the ball, and the ref blows a game-winning penalty instantly as soon as the player's feet are lifted, and he even claims he was never on his feet. On a different day, I can see this penalty going against England for holding on, but Andrew Brace at this point is just a broken man who wants to get off the field. Even the commentary team disagrees with the ref over this decision.
Saying he's never supporting his own weight. He was initially.
But either way, the penalty has been awarded, and Farrell looks to take the game. We all sat back waiting for the inevitable until, to the disbelief of anyone who was watching this game, we saw Farrell miss again. A huge let-off for France and a huge blow to England. France kicked deep from their 22 towards Billy Vunipola, who has had a great game in terms of ball carrying, but out of nowhere he drops the ball. Andrew Brace actually calls a knock-on. He's remembered the rules, and France move up the field. France, knowing they can't really compete at the scrum against England, put the ball in and back out of the scrum at incredible speed. They know they can't deal with the England scrum and cannot afford a penalty. They send players through on crash ball lines, including Makalau, who has a brilliant game overall and does brilliant work here, making good ground and taking 3 people with him. One of these 3 is Billy Vunipola, who after making a tackle lays on top of the man and doesn't roll away. Andrew Brace calls for the player to move out the way, and 4 seconds pass before Billy Vunipola actually moves, slowing down the ball completely and allowing England to reset their line. Let's just think about this for a second. A player doesn't roll away even after instructed by the ref. Haven't we seen this before? Yes, we have. Prezonti in the second half was pinned in by Itoje for 1.5 seconds and was trying to move out of the way. Because he didn't move out of the way in time, Andrew Brace awarded an advantage to England that lasted nearly a full minute. Conversely, this time, Vunipola is not there for 1.5 seconds, he is there for 4 seconds, and this isn't even advantage worthy to Brace. The lack of consistency here is truly appalling, and no wonder people claimed he was biased. You can't referee a game like this and not have people believe you are favouring a team. The same penalty. One, Andrew Brace let play to see if they could score a try, and if not, they could go for the 3 points. The other isn't even worth a penalty, especially a game-winning penalty. This is in range to win the game for France. England need to be cleaner than clean, but apparently Brace is now just reffing by his own rules. France continued to try and move forward, but England have the best defensive set of the game for them, in my opinion, committing 2 men to every tackle and no one in at the ruck. They can rely on just how good their defensive line is and just wait for France to make a mistake, which eventually comes when 3 players go off their feet at the ruck, a really stupid penalty to give away. England survive and get to move back up the field. England kick to touch and of course go for the maul, hoping for another penalty, but the French maulers worked really well throughout this game in stopping England, and rarely have they given away penalties at the maul, and France somehow managed to turn it over, and who else would it be other than Makalau? We need to talk about just how good this man is. If he played for England, Ireland or Wales or Scotland, people would herald him as the next big thing in Northern Hemisphere rugby and full of Lions potential. I genuinely reckon Makalau is as good, if not better, than Itoje in that jackling and stealing the ball technique. I am really looking forward to seeing his career developed, especially with being able to play 6 or 7. He is going to be big, I think, for French rugby. Not a lot else happens in this first half of sudden death. Teams basically just take it in turns, doing one attack, then kicking it away to the other team. One thing that did stick out, though, was after the clock went dead, France never kicked it out, which you would think they would want to, as it gives them the advantage in the kickoff for the second half, and makes me think that some of these players actually have no idea how long sudden death actually lasts for. We also need to mention, just at the end of the first half of sudden death, we get to see another classic Farrell foul. As Carbonell kicks the ball clear, Farrell attempts a half charge down the ball, and after the ball sails past him, he proceeds to run into the man kicking, literally tackling him at the knee while he is still on one leg, looking to injure the man who can kick to win the game for France, with Jalibert also injured on the bench. I hate play like this, and Farrell is without a doubt one of the worst perpetrators in World Rugby for this, performing illegal tackles and hits on players, and yet never seemingly get penalised, shoulder charging people in tackles against South Africa, just to name one off the top of my head, and here we see him do it again. But why is the TMO not checking this? It's obviously late, and it's obviously intentional. You had no reason to run into the player after you miss a charge down. He didn't even leave his feet for the charge down. So why is no one looking for potential foul play? Get it on the big screen and let the ref see. But alas, we've had terrible officiating up to now, so why change now? Eventually, after some back and two, Robson gets driven into touch after trying to go himself for some reason, even though there were much better options open to him, spreading the ball wide, and with Raka driving him out, we finish the first half of sudden death, still somehow without a winner. The second half of sudden death starts off very strange. Carbonell takes the kickoff going deep as expected, but he actually takes the kickoff a solid 2 metres ahead of the halfway line, which I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to do. Galtier has obviously realised rules of the game are changing depending on how the wind blows in Andrew Brace's mind. The ball goes high and long with Macalou chasing it down. The ball lands in the middle of a group of players and bounces towards the England try line. Robson collects the ball and is jumped on by Villiers and Jalanche, who get over the ball. Robson hangs onto the ball, a clear penalty. France should win a penalty on the England 5 metre line within 15 seconds of this second half starting. It could be the game over. Andrew Brace blows his whistle, but no. He has blown the whistle for a knock-on from Macalou at the restart. Look at where the referee is in relation to this knock-on. Now, have a look how many players are involved in this group, and he feels confident enough to call that one French player in this group of 6 people is the one who touched the ball. Confident enough to blow the whistle immediately without asking the TMO to check, nor does he blow the whistle for the penalty for Robson holding onto the ball and then check with the TMO if it needs to be overturned if there was an earlier infringement. This is a game-winning whistle blow, and Andrew Brace calls this from 30 metres away, claiming he knows exactly which of the one of 6 people touched the ball, the same man that didn't see a knock-on occur 2 metres in front of him at the end of the second half. And after the knock-on is given, the players ask him to check with the TMO. We get to see a replay, and lo and behold, Macalou never touches the ball. Both of the commentators agree he hasn't touched it.
That went back from an England shirt. He knows he doesn't touch it.
And yet the decision isn't overturned. This went from being a game-winning penalty to one team to a knock-on to the opposite team when France didn't even touch the ball, and it wasn't even checked by the TMO. What a disgraceful call. England get their scrum, and of course, as it has all game on an England put-in, England come away with a penalty, and they move further down the field, and boy do they bring the attack. Multiple runs carving through the defence. France are obviously exhausted at this point and manage to hold on for as long as they can. Included in this is a brilliant run by Luke Cowan-Dickie, which, had it not been for a last-ditch tackle, could have been a remarkable try and made me eat my own words about no one scoring a try in sudden death. And the referee controversy, though, is not yet over. after Cowan-Dickie is tackled, just watch the England clear out. 3 English players enter the ruck at the side. You can tell it's at the side as they are standing next to a straight white line on the pitch that shows the angle they have entered from. All 3 are 45 degrees to the side. All 3 commit a foul 2 metres away from the referee, but there's no penalty in Andrew Brace's mind. Who even knows what the rules are in this game anymore? England continue pressing the attack until a brilliant kick from George Ford pins Raka right in the back corner. He manages to avoid 2 tackles, all fair play to him, of a well-chased England attack, only to be caught by Curry, who performs what I can only call a seatbelt tackle, holding Raka literally in a headlock and then dragging him to the ground. No penalty needed here, Andrew. Don't think back to that Ben Earl tackle when he was also hip height and got tackled in the head. Don't think back, whatever you do. Oh, God. Carbonell rucks over the ball as Itoje goes to steal the ball. Itoje doesn't even attempt to pick up the ball here. He just looks at the ref and shouts, claiming he can't get to the ball because it's been sealed off. Some clever play, great way to manipulate the ref to getting what you want to do. Andrew Brace can't take any more and just blows the whistle. He has lost control. He even claims that Carbonell went off his feet. Now, I have gone back through this footage frame by frame, and during this entire ruck, even after more French players join, at no point do Carbonell's knees touch the ground. He actually does a miraculous job of staying on his feet, given that he has someone of the skill level of Itoje being in the counter ruck. I would concede if the referee penalised him and said he sealed off the ball. Maybe I could agree with that, because technically he is sort of over the ball and he's sort of trying to get his own ball off the man in the ruck. It's a bit questionable. But he claims Carbonell went straight off his feet, which simply doesn't happen. Andrew Brace being yelled at by Itoje crumbles and just blew his whistle. This is painful to watch as a rugby level, but it is a joyous result for any England supporter who felt that this game was going to slip away from them. Owen Farrell steps up and manages to finally get the kick that wins the game for England, and England are crowned the Autumn Nations Cup champions. And just to recap the final actions of what happened at the end of this game, I'm going to go through the bullet points of facts that happened in this game, and you can just see how poor Andrew Brace does in this second half. France kick off, no one touches the ball. Robson collects and holds onto the ball in a ruck. No penalty is given against England. Instead, Andrew Brace gives a knock-on that didn't happen. This leads to a scrum that Brace has given a penalty to England in nearly all scrums on their own put-ins. That leads to England moving up the field. England perform an illegal clear-out to which no penalty is given. This leads to Ford's kick to pin France into their own 5-metre channel. Curry makes a seatbelt tackle and there is no penalty. Carbonell rucks over, always remaining on his feet. Itoje doesn't grab the ball, yells at Andrew Brace. Andrew Brace gives a penalty against France for something that didn't actually happen. England kick and win the game. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how one man can decide who wins a game of rugby. Well, guys, we have done it. We have gone through the full game and been able to reflect on what has been such an exciting tooth and nail battle between giants of a World Cup England team versus a 68-cap French team. And there's been much to look over along the way. I definitely want to talk about the two teams individually in this game, but firstly we have to talk about the officiating. I wouldn't be surprised if 70% of these two videos is just pointing out how badly refereed this game was. And it's so sad to see. As an avid rugby watcher, I only want to see the best rugby. And as a Northern Hemisphere watcher, that's where I want to see the internationals flourish. But this game was a symbol of everything wrong with Northern Hemisphere rugby. The refereeing in this game was so poor to watch, from touch judges who literally never called anything, to a TMO who can't see the same fouls as someone watching them from their sofa at home, to needing to review footage 9 or 10 times from different angles to make a single call, to a referee who is completely biased towards the better team on paper, penalising one side for fouls committed by both, even when the same fouls happen within minutes, even seconds of each other. Realistically, this game is so much worse after re-watching it than I even thought watching it live. I've tried to work out excuses, but eventually you just have to say these referees weren't up to the tasks. I've heard about a week after that Andrew Brace has actually been banned from refereeing any French international or club level games, and I genuinely thought this meant there was some sort of bribery or bias actually involved, because no tier 1 high performance referee could officiate a match that badly without some other underlying agenda. But apparently they can. The ban has actually come from threats he'd received after literally single-handedly stopping France from winning that final by not penalising better England side, missing obvious fouls and awarding penalties against France that didn't even occur. A bit of me still believes there must surely be something untoward with that game. I cannot believe 4 referees can be so poor all in one game and not call each other out. And I feel World Rugby needs to look at the rules and how referees are taught if this is going to be the new breed of referees we will have for the next 10 years or so. How are smaller teams ever going to compete? We all want to see Italy being competitive in the Six Nations. We all want to see Japan and Fiji and Georgia and other tier 2 nations move up and take on the big boys. But we can't expect them to win a game if referees have a bias towards the better team on paper. And if the smaller teams never win, even when they should, no one will watch the sport we all love and it will just die out. Personally, I feel all referees should be removed from international duty and have to spend a bit more time at club level to improve and work their way back up to the international scene. There needs to be reprimand, especially for a TMO, when you are surrounded by technology and 8 different camera angles and can go through a shot frame by frame, and a team of people around you feeding you info and camera shots. How can you not see blatant penalties that a commentator can see, or even me sat on my sofa at home? It is truly disgraceful, and I hope this is sorted out by the coming Six Nations so we don't have to see this poor level of refereeing again. I also feel World Rugby needs to look at changing the rules. First off should be the idea of sudden death. It doesn't work anymore. If Farrell had been in his usual kicking ability, sudden death in this game ends in 69 seconds. And how rubbish would that have been? I think they need to change the rules to be that you need to score a try in order to win. My preferable method is that it's the first team to score 10. That way, a team could get 4 penalties and drop goals, or just 1 penalty and a converted try. Imagine how much harder a team would work to attempt to get a try in sudden death if it was first to 10 points. The next rule I think they need to look at is decorum towards the ref. In this game, English players constantly yell at Andrew Brace and make backhanded comments that he warns them about. I think World Rugby needs to introduce a rule that if a player makes a statement and not a question, that player immediately gives away a penalty. We can't fall into football style of yelling at the ref to get your own way. There needs to be sanctions against this. And it's not just England that that do this. Every team has players that fall into this bracket. Wales have Dan Biggar, who constantly screams and shouts towards the ref. Sexton's also a bit of a critic for one of these, throwing his arms up in the air when they don't get their own way. They all have them in every team, but I definitely feel it's something that needs to be stamped out. If you penalise a player 5 minutes into a game for shouting at you as a referee, I can guarantee for the rest of the 75 minutes, they won't do it again. And if you keep penalising people over and over and over again, if you concede 4 penalties and the other team scores 12 points because one player can't shut their mouth towards the referee, I guarantee you a coach will remove that player from the pitch to try and save the team. You will eradicate this shouting at referees. All you need to do is take control and penalise players for it. And finally, I think it needs to be looked at the onus of scoring penalties. England have created the perfect game plan under Eddie Jones for playing big games, where basically you just kick 10 penalties in a game and you win 30-0. There's no point going for tries, and when two teams play the same tactic, as we had in this game, you have very boring points of teams kicking each other the ball because it's easier to give a penalty away now with the ball in hand. And that is why people are saying rugby is getting boring. And while rules are introduced to make the game safer for players, the spectator side still needs to exist. I think World Rugby needs to look at the idea of reducing a penalty to 2 or maybe even 1 point. At the moment, 2 penalties are so easy to win, and 2 penalties is worth nearly the same amount as a converted try, which is much harder to come by. So why would you bother going for tries when you can just win lots of penalties and you will win? Now imagine if a penalty was worth 2 points. You would need to score 4 penalties to be worth a converted try. Teams would attempt so much harder to try and get tries. And if you reduce it to 1 point, you would need to score 7 penalties. No one in rugby is kicking for posts at that point. It's all running rugby, attempting to get the try. Either way, something desperately needs to change in order for rugby to keep living on. In terms of the teams, England did everything right in this game. They got on side with the referee and took the chances for points when they were awarded them. In any other game, Farrell kicks better. England win this game inside the 80 minutes. That was going to be a fact. Just keep peppering kicks. But what is interesting is that France have uncovered a bit of a weakness in this England game plan. England drill their players to stop other teams in their tracks and win loads of penalties in turnovers and the other team making a mistake. They spend most of the game without the ball and get tries by driving mauls or individual players making great runs, but it relies on the opponent team playing their own game. France in this game actually showed if you perform England's game plan back to them, constantly kicking them possession and holding your own defensive line, England don't actually have a plan B. They are so good at plan A they don't switch and actually look a little lost. This could be a big gap to utilise for teams still trying to find their own game plan. The new Wales squad is still looking a little lost and only showing hope when given full attack. Could they adapt to the England style of rugby? Would it take much for Scotland to switch over to this style after they've become a lot more consistent at being closer to winning games? Could Italy improve their fitness levels and compete in that world? The only counter to England's game plan is to either just be better than them or play exactly how England do. And as World Cup finalists, Six Nations winners, and now Autumn Nations Cup winners, is it worth looking and switching to their game plan? France certainly look like they're up to the task. Talking of France, can I take a minute to just talk about how good some of these French players are? Big names in the forwards for me is Woki and Makalau. They are both extraordinary players, and currently the French squad doesn't possess players of their calibre. Aldrit and Olivon are huge ball carriers and support runners, but Woki and Makalu offer so much in terms of jackling and line-out disruption. They can both play 6 and 7, and I think both of them could look to take the number 6 shirt in the starting French team, along with Dulan, who played brilliantly in this tournament and I think will be looking to take Bouthier's shirt away from him at 15. I think he's got a lot to offer France, and I'm already worried how ferocious this France team will be by the Six Nations, let alone the World Cup. I don't actually think it's too outrageous to believe they could actually win the World Cup in 2023. But that's part 2 over, guys. I'm sorry it's taken so long to get out, but there's so much that goes into making these sorts of videos. But if you did enjoy the video, please drop it a like and subscribe to the channel just to keep up to date with all of the latest videos. I've recently done the channel's first ever proper podcast with some friends, going over our thoughts on the Autumn Nations Cup and going through each team and who impressed us. If you enjoy these longer podcast style videos, and you may want to check that out when I get it up on the channel. It's been so nice seeing how many people have enjoyed part 1 of this series and people leaving likes and comments and asking for part 2. It really gives me a drive to get these videos out, and it's something I take a lot of pride in when making them, and it's nice to see that people enjoy them and are looking forward to seeing more from me. And now I know how intense prepping and making these videos will be. If another game comes along that I want to do a full breakdown on, hopefully I will be better prepared, and of course I'll be doing my usual preview videos and some coverage of the upcoming Six Nations. Hopefully they actually go ahead and aren't cancelled, but we can only live and hope, as I can't wait to have some more international rugby on my screens. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you've all enjoyed it today, guys. I will see you next time. Bye bye.